Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this incredibly gloriously beautiful morning. I would, if I'm being completely honest, I would rather be outside in the sunshine and just like, but, you know, Bible and outside sunshine, but Bible wins. So here we go. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Nicole. You've probably seen me around all over the church if you've ever been there. But here we go. That's my name. There we go. Okay, so Isaiah 2. We're in Isaiah 2 today. Yesterday, Tim did an incredible job of just kind of setting the scene for Isaiah and what's happening, who he's talking to, and all that. And so we're just going to jump right into Isaiah 2 today. It's a little bit of a longer chapter, so we're going to actually just kind of skim the first few verses and then start reading in verse 5. Fun fact about the first couple of verses, Micah 4, 1 through 3 is almost a word for word copy of the first four verses of Isaiah 2. Now, Micah, the prophet Micah, was a contemporary of Isaiah. They spoke at the same time, so it makes sense that God would give them similar messages to similar groups of people. But there's just a little fun fact if you want to check that out on your own time later. But we are going to start in verse 5. So here we go. Come, descendants of Jacob, let us walk in the light of the Lord. And we're going to pause there because, I want to stop there. So, descendants of Jacob, I think we should just establish exactly who we're talking to. Now, this book was written to the kingdom of Judah, right? Yes. To the Israelites. Now, we're not Israel. Well, I don't know. Some of you may be. I'm not. I have no Jewish blood in me. I'm mostly Scottish. But, however, spiritually, I do count as a descendant of Jacob. Now, Paul talked about how we were grafted in. The church, those of us who follow the Lord, who walk in his footsteps, those of us who are Christians, the church, are grafted into that family, the family of God. Now, God called Israel, right? And he called them his people. They were his family. And we, as the church, get to be grafted into that family, which means we get to follow God's ways, right? We are the people of God. We now are responsible to follow God, right? But this book was written to the literal genetic descendants of Jacob, not to us. However, we are also descendants of Jacob, and there is a lot as we read through this that we can glean from, that was actually written, that should convict us, that it wasn't written to us, but definitely for us, there's a lot in there. So we're just going to keep that in mind as we keep reading. Come, descendants of Jacob, let us walk in the light of the Lord. That is the first one of those blessings, honestly, that we get to inherit when we're grafted in. We are no longer bound by sin, by evil, by the powers of this world. We get to walk in the light of the Lord as we surrender ourselves to God, as we choose to follow his ways. We get to walk in his light. We're no longer trapped in darkness. We're no longer bound by that. We get to walk in the light of the Lord. So here we go. We're just going to start in. We're descendants of Jacob spiritually, and we get to walk in his light. And that's a great way to start. Hold on to your hats because this is going to get crazy here. All right, verse 6. For the Lord has rejected his people, the descendants of Jacob. I feel like we just established this is a good thing. So I don't like this verse now. The Lord has rejected his people, the descendants of Jacob, because they have filled their land with practices from the east, and with sorcerers as the Philistines do. They have made alliances with pagans. Israel is full of silver and gold. There is no end to its treasures. Their land is full of war horses. There is no end to its chariots. Their land is full of idols. The people worship things they have made with their own hands. Guys, we all know that's dumb. Just don't. So now they will be humbled, and all will be brought low. Do not forgive them. Crawl into caves and the rocks. Hide in the dust from the terror of the Lord and the glory of his majesty. Okay, so here we go. We get to walk in the light of the Lord because we are descendants of Jacob, right? These descendants of Jacob were not walking in the light of the Lord. They got to. They were called. Israel was the chosen people. God chose them. God called them. God blessed them if they chose to walk in his ways and receive those blessings. And they chose to engage in sorcery and worship idols and accumulate treasure for themselves. and forget who God was, put other things in the place of God. They chose to uh, exalt themselves and what they wanted and worship other gods instead of following their Lord, the one who called them, the one who chose them. And that's a bad idea, generally speaking, right? Like we know that's a dumb idea. And it was proved over and over and over again through Israel's history, right? Like they would worship idols. God would send, the Philistines, whatever, to like enslave them, and eventually he would send a judge to free them, and then they would be like, oh yay, it's God, and then they would do it again. And we do that too. Like we're really good at hating on Israel, but we do that too, right? Like we know that. No, we're not really in a place to judge here, but God is, and that's what He's doing here. And he has pretty strong words. He's rejected his people, the descendants of Jacob. Verse 11, human pride will be brought down and human arrogance will be humbled. Only the Lord will be exalted on that day of judgment. A couple months ago, I think, I did a devotion on Philippians 2, which is my favorite passage in the Bible. And it talks about Jesus being exalted at the end. After he came, after he subjected himself to darkness, to the evils of this world, after he came and was born in like animal filth in a barn and just like was humiliated, honestly, like the Lord of all creation came and did this, and he humbled himself immensely, and God will exalt him, right? And here again, the Lord will be exalted on that day of judgment. Human pride will be brought down, human arrogance will be humbled. And like, honestly, guys, what do we have to be proud of? We all have sinned. And Romans makes it very clear that sin brings death. We all are deserving of death because we have all sinned. None of us are, in and of ourselves, none of us are worthy. And we know this. Jesus is the only sinless one, and he is the only one who deserves to be exalted. But we all do this. We all exalt ourselves in various ways. We all have issues where we walk in pride. We all have these things, and we don't deserve to, because what have we actually done that warrants us being proud of? Like, looking back at my life, any of those things where I could say, oh, like maybe, no, those were all times that God stepped in. All of the things that I have accomplished, all the big, amazing things that I've done, I look back and I see God's fingerprints all through that. What do I have to be proud of? Nothing. I get to watch God work through me, and I get to see what he does, and I get to exalt him for what he does through me, right? Like, I still get to do what he says. I still get to walk in that, and I still experience blessing from walking with him. But I have done nothing that deserves me having pride. I have nothing to be proud of in that way. Does that make sense? And neither do you. Like, if you look at your life, honestly, like, look at it, evaluate it. All of those times when you accomplished, look back and honestly look for God's fingerprints in that. Look back and honestly examine all of those times when God stepped into your life in a big way or a small way, and look and see if there's anything that you should feel pride in. And I'm telling you, there isn't, because it's all God, and God is the only one who is sinless. We have all failed. We have all fallen short, as Romans says, and we all deserve death, right? Like that's basic Christian theology there. Like God is it. We have no business exalting ourselves. Only the Lord will be exalted on that day of judgment. We're gonna skip ahead a little bit, because there's most of this chapter is God's judgment, right? But we're gonna skip ahead to verse 17, actually, for starters. There's this whole passage where, heaven's armies are his day of reckoning, all of that. He's punishing the proud. But verse 17, human pride will be humbled and human arrogance will be brought down. Only the Lord will be exalted on that day of judgment, which is basically almost word for word an exact copy of verse 11 that we just read. When the Bible repeats something, that means you should probably be paying attention. So like, this is a big deal. The Bible talks a lot about pride and the sin that pride is. And it's a huge one, because pride simply means putting yourself in God's place. On very simple terms, when we walk in pride, we are exalting ourselves and putting ourselves in God's place. And that's just a dangerous thing. Like, that's a bad idea. Don't do that. You can't be God. Honestly, like, that sounds exhausting a little bit to me, if we're just going to be real. But like, I can't do that, and I don't want to do that. That's a bad plan. Don't exalt yourself. Exalt God. He's God. Verse 18. Idols will completely disappear when the Lord rises to shake the earth. His enemies will crawl into holes in the ground. They will hide in caves in the rocks from the terror of the Lord and the glory of his majesty. So this last few verses here, we're actually transitioning into more like end times prophecy. We've been talking about just God's judgment against the kingdom of Israel, the kingdom of Judah, back then, that those physical descendants of Jacob, right? The genetic descendants of Jacob. Now we're talking about the end times. And Isaiah does that. It flips back and forth between the two sometimes. But here we're talking about Judgment Day. We're talking about the end of time, when God wins. We know that he's going to win. Like, we can read through Revelation and a lot of it's really confusing. It doesn't make sense. But at the end of the book, he wins. And there is so much hope in that. For those of us who have chosen to place ourselves in his family, who have chosen to follow him, who have been grafted in, there is so much hope in the fact that, like, whatever mess we walk through here, whatever's going on in our lives, whatever pain and trials and suffering we experience here, God will win. It will be worth it at the end, when we get there and we get to experience heaven with him, when there is no more pain, no more tears. Revelation 21 talks about just the peace that will exist at the end for those of us who get to just live with God, for those of us who get to just live in relationship with God for eternity. Revelation 21 paints such a beautiful picture of that, and I can't wait. And guys, God wins. And even here, just these last couple verses of Isaiah 2, it talks about just God winning, the glory of his majesty, and he will be exalted. No matter what men try to do to him, he will be exalted. And so, like, I don't know, join the winning side. That seems like a good plan, because he is going to win. And nothing that we do can stop that. And whether we place him in the correct place in our lives, and truly exalt him, or whether we walk in pride and exalt ourselves, at the end, he is still going to win. So there is your challenge this time around for today. There is your challenge. Walk with God. Be as a grafted in member of his people, as one of Jacob's descendants, one of Jacob's spiritual descendants. Walk with God. Leave him in his throne and in his correct place in your life, and do not exalt yourselves. And go out and live for God this week. And there's my challenge for you. That felt like a bit of a sprint, but there's a lot of stuff in Isaiah, and it's pretty cool. So I can't wait to keep going through this with y'all. I'm going to pray and then just kind of dismiss us out into this glorious day. Lord, thank you for the fact that you are God. Thank you for the fact that you will win, and that we can know that you have told us, that you have proven yourself. Thank you for proving yourself to me. Thank you for consistently reminding me who you are and exalting yourself in my life, and humbling me when I need to be humbled, as uncomfortable and painful as that may be. Thank you for faithfully doing what you say you will do and being God and proving yourself in that way to me. Lord, I want to pray over our day as we all go out to be your people today. Lord, I pray that you would bless our footsteps, lead us where you want today. Lead us to the conversations you want us to have, the people you want us to interact with, and just bless our day. In Jesus' name, amen. That is all I have for you. Love you all. Bye.